Funding for the Nashville podcast comes from the neurosurgeons of the Howell Allen Clinic, national leaders in brain and spine surgery, specializing in laser brain tumor surgery and robotic spine surgery. The Howell Allen Clinic. Your life is our life's work.
This is the Nashville podcast. It's August 3rd, 2026. Today we're in that lull between the end of early voting and a primary election day. But this day in 1950 was significant in Tennessee as the last time voters in this state had to pay a poll tax in order to cast a primary ballot. I'm Nina Cardona, and this is your daily digest of what's happening around Middle Tennessee with context and backstory from Nashville Public Radio, WPLN News. As long as there have been elections, there have been politicians trying to create systems around voting that favors their own viewpoint, party, or platform. And they found a variety of methods trying to nudge things in their own direction. This year, we've seen a whole drama play out around one classic option, redistricting to gerrymander the political maps into a sure bet for the majority group. In the earliest days of the United States, most states pulled the lever of limiting the right to vote to white male landowners. State by state, the requirement to own property fell away by the 1850s. And after the Civil War, the 15th Amendment made it illegal to bar men from voting based on race. And at that point, the people who wanted to make sure things didn't get out of hand, as they might say, had to get a little more creative. Their main concern with voting, one which they shared with many of America's founding fathers, was making sure that the privilege was only extended to people that they considered smart enough, moral enough, and invested enough in the outcome of the election. And because of their bigoted ideas about race and class, they simply could not accept the idea that the average black or poor person met that standard, and especially not poor black people or women, but they didn't have to worry about that half of the population yet, since it would be decades before female suffrage became the law of the land. After the Civil War, when Tennessee rewrote its constitution in order to rejoin the United States, its authors included a clause that required voters to pay an annual tax in order to obtain a ballot. The tax was to be at least 50 cents and no more than $1. That sounds like literal pocket change today, but back then that amount was basically a full day's wage for a farm worker. And for a lot of poor people, which at the time included most black people, every cent they earned was pretty much wiped away immediately by the basic costs of food and shelter. So for those folks at the bottom of the economic ladder, paying the poll tax was basically the equivalent of fasting for a day. Combine that with everything in society communicating the idea that there would never be a candidate who really cared about them. Altogether, it was a pretty powerful message saying to poor and black people, why bother? Just don't even try to vote. Meanwhile, they had kids to feed. They had hard manual labor that demanded hours of their time every day. Just living was a lot. In other words, the poll tax worked to depress the vote. Which isn't to say it was exactly popular. Now think about the Republican voter these days who looks at the redistricting and says, well, I like that our side will have more people in Congress, but I do feel a little bit weird about the 9th district stretching halfway across the state. There are people now who feel a little queasy about the political gamesmanship, but ultimately shrug it off. It was the same with the poll tax. Now, the average white Tennessean at the time might not have been bothered by efforts to suppress the black vote, but they at least seemed to feel like the poll tax was kind of a pain. There was significant debate on the matter. There was confusion about who was supposed to collect it and how people were supposed to prove that they'd paid it. The government tried to smooth over some concerns, the same way they did generations later when new forms of gambling were made legal. Proceeds from the poll tax were earmarked for education. In some communities, that led to the school board becoming very concerned about making sure that poll tax was collected. In some places, they took over the job themselves. By the late 1880s, the legislature decided it needed to put more roadblocks in between black voters and the ballot box. Tennessee adopted a secret ballot. That meant voters had to be able to read what was on the ballot. There was initially a clause allowing certain illiterate voters to get a little help. It said anyone who'd cast a ballot as far back as 1857 or before could have someone read the ballot to them. 1857 was the last election before the Civil War, and by this point it was 4 decades in the past. So that help was only available to older white men, not black voters who lacked access to schooling. Voter registration was instituted for the first time, but only in urban areas where there were large concentrations of black voters. The way it worked back then, that meant 2 separate trips to a central location, one to register and one on election day. And the people the officials considered undesirable voters didn't have any option for paid leave or time off in the middle of the day. Popping over to the courthouse to fill out some forms during normal business hours meant going without pay for however long that errand took. It was almost like another tax. The state's newspapers heralded the passage of those laws as the end of black voting in Tennessee. The whole time these laws were in force, there were people crying out for them to be overturned. There were people decrying the racism of it all. There were advocates for the poor saying they weren't fair to anyone with a low income. Ultimately, in 1953, the state Supreme Court determined the central tentpole of that cluster of laws, the poll tax, was unconstitutional. And then, in 1965, the federal government adopted a landmark piece of legislation that wiped away a wide array of discriminatory practices called the Voting Rights Act. That is, you may recall, the law that was partially overturned by this year's U.S. Supreme Court decision that opened the door to the recent redistricting. Now, the redrawing of Tennessee's congressional map is not the only controversial move regarding voting that's been made in recent memory. 15 years ago, there was a lot of outcry when the state started requiring voters to show photo ID. It was billed as an election security measure, but activists and advocacy groups were quick to point out that it put people who didn't drive at a distinct disadvantage. That's the overlapping factor in a Venn diagram of poor folks, older folks, some of the youngest voters, and disabled people. The state did make it easier to get a photo ID that isn't a driver's license, but you still got to make the trip to the DMV and the headaches that are involved in that. So some pointed out it's another of those requirements that functions as a sneaky, hidden poll tax. And the complaint we hear now is that sneaky and hidden has become the name of the game in trying to cut certain voters out of the democratic process. Back in 1889, Tennessee's governor said very clearly that he wanted to put up obstacles to voting in order to stomp out the black vote. Nobody's going to say that out loud anymore. But that is exactly the assertion being made in lawsuits that still hang over our state's election system at the moment. The courts did not move to stop the new districts from going into effect for this election. But the lawsuits alleging that redistricting was motivated by race, not partisanship, are still moving forward, combined into one large case in the federal court system. In just a few minutes, Shakespeare behind prison bars. That's coming up after the newscast.
Funding for the Nash Villager podcast comes from the neurosurgeons of the Howell Allen Clinic, national leaders in brain and spine surgery, specializing in laser brain tumor surgery and robotic spine surgery. The Howell Allen Clinic. Your life is our life's work.
Way back in 1952, the bronze Mercury statue atop Union Station took a tumble. There's been a replacement up there for the past 30 years, and that prompted the question,
the original, I'm wondering where it could be.
Curious Nashville chases down the old bronze with some twists and turns along the way. Learn more and ask your question at WPLN.org/curious.
Here's the latest from WPLN News. A driver ran through a red light on Broadway in downtown Nashville on Saturday afternoon, killing one person and injuring several others. The man who died was Timothy Wedlock, a 58-year-old from Sydney, Australia. He was hit at the intersection of 4th Avenue and Broadway. The driver has been identified as Thomas Cahill, an 87-year-old from Bowling Green. Police say he did not show signs of intoxication, according to the Tennessean. 3 other pedestrians were struck, and 2 of them were hospitalized. The accident has put a spotlight on the debate over car traffic on Broadway, a street where hundreds of pedestrians use the crosswalk at a given time. It's closed on weekend nights, starting at 7 p.m., but some believe it should be closed all the time, or at least all weekend. There have been 28 pedestrian deaths on Nashville roads this year. At this point in 2025, there had only been 9, according to a map maintained by Cycling City, LLC. Well, they're pretty rare outside of Nashville's downtown entertainment district, but inside of it, there has been a simmering tension around pedicabs. Not the pedal taverns, but the 3-wheeled bike taxis. WPLN's Catherine Sweeney gives us the latest.
They might look like bikes, but Nashville's pedicabs aren't allowed in protected bike lanes. Joy Hassler, a local pedicab driver, told a Metro committee that is not common knowledge.
Even last night when I was riding the pedicab, I had 4 or 5 trucks tell me to get into the bike lane. I don't think a lot of people understand that we're not allowed to, and so they're kind of forcing us, specifically the big trucks.
On Tuesday, the council will have a third and final vote to change that. One of the authors is Metro Council member Sean Parker. He says that kind of attitude about non-car travelers is pervasive.
People do get very aggressive about insisting that you be in the bike lane. Sometimes, making physical contact with your bicycle, often screaming, often honking, often throwing things. So this is about safety for pedicab drivers, for the passengers.
He noted the new stadium will have less parking available than the current one, driving up needs for transportation alternatives like pedicabs. Catherine Sweeney, WPLN News.
Less than a week out from the election, U.S. Senator Marsha Blackburn released an internal poll. It paints a much rosier picture of her lead in the governor's race than the other poll results. The Nashville Banner reports her camp's numbers show Blackburn testing 17 points ahead of her competitor, U.S. Representative John Rose. That comes just a few days after a different poll found the two neck and neck. The national conservative consulting firm On Message released those numbers after interviewing 800 likely Republican voters. About 35% said they were leaning towards Blackburn, and 31% said Rose. Not too far behind was Christian nationalist state lawmaker Monty Fritz. Early voting closed over the weekend, and Thursday is election night. A Metro Water employee was already in hot water with the feds. Now he's dealing with HR concerns. The two are connected. In late July, the Nashville Banner reported an arrest warrant had been executed on a Metro employee who was then placed on administrative leave. The outlet has since confirmed the employee was Metro Water Services Assistant Director John Honeysucker. Law enforcement won't comment on the nature of the investigation, but two prominent business leaders in Nashville appear to be connected to the investigation. On July 21st, federal agents seized Honeysucker's phone. The next morning, Honeysucker reportedly reached out to Metro's IT department to say he had, quote, messed up his phone. He cited flooding at his house. The department is considering disciplinary action, including demotion, suspension, or dismissal, according to a letter obtained by the Banner. It says the issue is not that Honeysucker is under investigation, but that he was dishonest about why he needed a replacement phone. Tennessee's early childhood education system ranks in the top half of the nation, according to a new report from Wallet Hub. That's a consumer information and personal finance site. Overall, Tennessee's pre-K system ranked 21st. The report considered factors like educational quality, accessibility, and financial support. The pre-K programs themselves are considered quite good, ranking 14th in the nation for quality. But Tennessee got a middling score in accessibility. And when it comes to financial support, Tennessee was in the bottom 10. That means preschool programs in the state receive fewer public dollars, and parents spend a higher portion of their pay on child care costs compared to other states. The Sumner County School Board is working to fire a tenured teacher at White House High School. They say she made political comments in class. The board alleges a Spanish teacher named Stephanie Braswell called herself an activist and made comments about U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement that made students uncomfortable. Board members have voted to oust her, but that doesn't take effect immediately. She's currently on leave. Braswell tells WKRN the entire situation is a misunderstanding and, in her words, a nightmare. She says the remarks were taken out of context and that she's never called herself an activist. Because she's tenured, Braswell is entitled to due process under state law. That includes the right to a hearing with witnesses, the right to counsel, and judicial review. It could soon be more hospitable to travel by Greyhound bus in and out of Knoxville, which is one city with a connection to Middle Tennessee. WUOT's Jackie Sieber reports Knoxville is getting a new enclosed terminal after 4 years without one.
Matthew DeBar-DeLaban is a council member. He facilitated the lease through his day job in real estate.
One of the hopes is that now they'll have a facility with restrooms, with a seating area, with a ticket agent, with food nearby.
Greyhound currently picks up in front of a bank in East Knoxville. Passengers like Jacob Steelman huddle under the bank's awning and sit alongside the curb to wait for their ride.
I mean, this isn't a very accessible location.
A spokesperson for Greyhound says the company hopes to open the new terminal early next year. I'm Jackie Sieber in Knoxville.
A Tennessee College of Applied Technology is offering a new training to build up the pipeline of qualified workers for a major industry in Clarksville. This fall, the school is launching a tile manufacturing operator program at its Clarksville campus. News Channel 5 reports the courses will focus less on manual labor and more on how to operate, maintain, and fix the automated systems that drive modern manufacturing. Classes begin in September or October, with the program expected to last about 5 months. You'll find more news anytime at WPLN.org. In LaGrange, Kentucky, a group of incarcerated men are finding a sense of purpose and belonging through acting. From the Appalachian Mid-South newsroom, Giselle Roden takes us inside their production of William Shakespeare's The Tempest.
Speak to the mariners, fall to it, yarling, or we run ourselves aground.
The show opens with a vicious storm hammering a ship carrying the King of Naples and his crew. Their Elizabethan period costumes flow over khaki jumpsuits with their prison numbers and last names. At Luther Luckett Correctional Complex in LaGrange, 22 incarcerated men spent 9 months working on this performance for the 31st season of Shakespeare Behind Bars. They performed it for their peers as well as loved ones from the outside. Theater veteran Kurt Tofflin spent 2 decades working for companies like Stage One and Kentucky Shakespeare before transitioning to theater education, with the goal of teaching underserved communities.
I believe that arts can heal, and I believe Shakespeare in particular, he was really interested in the human behavior and emotional literacy and writing about really the interior world of a human being.
In 1995, Tofflin pitched the idea of Shakespeare Behind Bars to then-warden Larry Chandler, who says he had his reservations.
I'm not a big Shakespeare fan, but Kurt has it right when he says Shakespeare has talked about almost every condition of life.
Chandler says he witnessed how the program changed the men.
It's an amazing thing to see a bunch of guys on this yard out here rehearsing lines from Shakespeare. I mean, it gets everybody's attention.
Over 3 decades, Shakespeare Behind Bars has expanded to 8 other Kentucky prisons and 1 in Illinois. Ahead of this season's debut, Kentucky Shakespeare's costume designer, Donna Lawrence Downs, shows me the pieces for The Tempest in her Louisville studio. It's packed with clothing racks, sewing machines, and long white tables draped with fabrics. She says Shakespeare Behind Bars presents unique challenges. The biggest puzzle this year was figuring out how to dress the men playing female characters.
They wear scarves on their heads, and they wear long tabards, and that indicates a female role. It's a garment that front and back are just rectangles and some belting on the sides.
She has to keep in mind that the actors' jumpsuits must be visible underneath their costumes, and each design must pass through the metal detectors. I met Kentucky Shakespeare actor Christian Wiltshire in Luther Luckett's parking lot before the show. He visits the prison 3 times a week to help the cast and crew.
Even deeper than that is to help them get to the truth in their characters and in the relationships that they're building throughout the year.
As Wiltshire explains, there are some prerequisites to join: a year without any write-ups and a sponsorship by a cast member.
I heard one of the guys, he's always said that this program is not for anyone trying to get less time on their sentence. If someone on the yard comes up to him and says, "Why do you do it?" he just says, "Personal growth." And that's what it's about.
A security checkpoint, a bag scan, 3 locked steel doors, and a short walk around the prison yard later, it's nearly a packed house in the prison chapel.
Oh, woe the day! No harm!
Recent data from Kentucky's Justice and Public Safety Cabinet say about 30% of people released in 2023 were reincarcerated within 24 months. Among all Shakespeare Behind Bars alumni, the recidivism rate is 6%. Professor Danielle Littman with the University of Utah published research in 2020 on prison arts programs.
One of the things that we were looking at was just a general sense of hope and meaning and purpose while incarcerated. Now I have more of a sense of purpose and meaning in my life.
Jeff Smith, who was incarcerated for 26 years, says these programs are meaningful beyond the prison walls.
I was addicted to drugs, and so I had to get money for drugs, and you know what that leads to: robberies, thefts, burglaries. I couldn't stop. I finally caught myself in Shakespeare.
Back on stage, actor J.S. delivers Prospero's epilogue. The prison allowed me to record the performance on the condition that I use the men's initials instead of their full names.
Are all overthrown.
JS slowly removes his costume as he recites. Then he pulls out his prison badge and clips it back to his jumpsuit. Next, he puts his glasses back on, transforming from the character back into himself.
Let your indulgence set me free.
He explains that artistic choice in a Q&A after the show.
Prospero, throughout the entire play, he is a bastard to everybody, and he demands forgiveness from everybody, but he never apologizes for the bad things that he's done. I just wanted to cast off the character and ask for forgiveness from everybody.
Some of the cast will return for Much Ado About Nothing next season, and some may not. Regardless, they'll all stay part of the small community these actors have created in the most unlikely of places. I'm Giselle Roden in LaGrange.
This story was produced as part of the Appalachian Mid-South Newsroom, which is a collaboration between NPR and several public radio stations in West Virginia, Tennessee, and Kentucky. We do this roundup of Nashville news every weekday. Please consider subscribing on your favorite podcasting app. Thanks so much to all of you who've left 5 stars, a thumbs up, or a review in your app of choice. That little bit of love really does tell the algorithms that more people should hear about us. And of course, everything at WPLN News is listener-supported. You can make a donation at WPLN.org. That's it for today. Thanks so much for listening. Let's make this day a good one, and we'll catch back up tomorrow.
Funding for the Nash Villager podcast comes from the neurosurgeons of the Howell Allen Clinic, national leaders in brain and spine surgery, specializing in laser brain tumor surgery and robotic spine surgery. The Howell Allen Clinic. Your life is our life's work.